Daughter-in-law looked me in the eye at my own kitchen table and said, "Honestly, Ed, it would just be easier if you didn't come to Thanksgiving this year." Not, "We'd love you there, but it's complicated." Not, "The house is small and we're worried about space." Just easier. Like I was a scheduling problem. Like 63 years of living had made me into something inconvenient. I didn't say anything right away. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow sip, set it back down. My son was sitting right there. He didn't look up from his phone. That was the moment I understood something had shifted, not just in my family, in me. My name is Edward Callahan. Most people call me Ed. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer. Bridges, overpasses, the kind of infrastructure that holds a city together without anyone noticing it's there. I retired at 60, not because I was forced out, but because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Hand the work to younger people. Step back. Make room. What nobody tells you about stepping back is that some people take it as permission to step over you entirely. My son Nathan is 41. Smart kid, always was. Got his MBA from Ohio State, works in corporate finance now, does well for himself. I'm proud of him, genuinely. But somewhere in the last decade, he married a woman named Kristen who has very clear ideas about how things should be organized, and apparently, I didn't fit neatly into her system. It started small, the way it always does. Birthday dinners that got moved to restaurants I wasn't told about until after. Grandkids recitals I found out about from my neighbor who saw it on Facebook. Holidays where I'd show up and feel like a guest who'd arrived at the wrong address. Everybody polite, nobody glad to see me. I told myself I was imagining it. Old men get paranoid. You start reading rejection into things that are just people being busy. Life is complicated. Families drift. Then came October, about 2 years ago. Nathan called me on a Tuesday night. He had that careful voice he uses when he's delivering news he doesn't want to deliver. Measured, professional, like he's in a meeting. He said Kristen had been feeling stressed about the holidays. Said the house was going to be full. Said maybe this year, for Thanksgiving, it would be better if I just did my own thing. Your own thing. Those were the exact words. I'm a 63-year-old man whose wife passed 8 years ago. My own thing on Thanksgiving is a frozen turkey breast and the Macy's parade on a television set that's too big for my apartment because I bought it back when I thought I'd have people to watch football with. I said, "Okay, Nathan, I understand." I didn't understand, but I said it anyway. What I didn't tell him, what I hadn't told anyone, was what I'd been doing for the past 14 months in the second bedroom of my apartment. The one I'd converted into an office. The one with the whiteboards I'd covered in calculations, and the old drafting table I dragged in from storage, and the stacks of engineering journals nobody had read since the 90s. Let me back up. When I retired, I got restless within about 6 weeks. You spend 3 decades solving problems for a living, and suddenly there's no problem in front of you. It's disorienting in a way I didn't expect. I started consulting part-time for a small civil engineering firm, just to keep my head in it. And to that work, I ran into a problem that had been bothering the industry for years: the way aging highway bridges get assessed for structural fatigue. The current inspection model is visual and periodic. Inspectors go out every 2 years, look at things, write reports. It's better than nothing, but it misses the cumulative stress data, the small compounding deformations that don't look like much until they become catastrophic. I'd been thinking about a better way to do it since 2019, a continuous sensor-based assessment system embedded during construction or retrofit that feeds real-time data to a central analysis platform. Not revolutionary as a concept. The technology existed. What didn't exist was a reliable, cost-effective way to integrate it with existing bridge maintenance workflows across municipal governments that were already underfunded and understaffed. I've been working on that integration framework for over a year. Not as a hobby, as a real funded project, funded by me, out of my own savings, which is a different kind of scary when you're 62 and living on a fixed income. But I believed in it, and more importantly, I'd connected with 2 people who believed in it too. A former colleague named White, who'd gone into software after leaving the firm, and a younger engineer named Priya, who'd been doing her own sensor research at Carnegie Mellon. The three of us had been meeting by video call every 2 weeks for a year. We had a working prototype. We had a pilot program quietly running on 3 bridges in western Pennsylvania, with the blessing of the County Transportation Authority, who were desperate for anything that might help them stretch their maintenance budget. We had data, good data. What we didn't have yet was a real conversation with anyone who could scale it. That changed late October, the same week Nathan told me not to come to Thanksgiving. A federal infrastructure grant program had put out a call for innovative monitoring solutions. Dwight had submitted our framework 6 months earlier, and we'd been in a quiet waiting period that I'd almost stopped thinking about. Then one morning, I got an email. They wanted to schedule a preliminary review meeting in Washington. I read it 3 times before I called Dwight. "Does this mean what I think it means?" I asked. "It means we're not crazy," he said. We flew to DC in early November. The meeting was in a federal building downtown, the kind of building with marble floors and security badges and people who speak in acronyms. I wore the same suit I'd worn to my wife's funeral, which in retrospect was maybe not the most auspicious choice, but it was the only suit I owned that still fit properly. The review panel had 4 people. I don't remember all their names, but I remember the woman at the end of the table. Silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain. The kind of stillness that says she has sat in 1,000 of these meetings and has very little patience for anything that isn't real. She barely looked at us for the first 20 minutes. Then I started walking through the Pennsylvania data, and she looked up. She asked one question: "What's your failure detection lead time compared to standard visual inspection?" I said, "Our average early warning window is 63 days. She wrote something down. We flew home the same night. Dwight was cautiously optimistic. I was trying not to think about it too much, which is easier said than done when you're 63 and sitting alone in an apartment with a too big TV and nowhere to be on Thanksgiving. That holiday, I made a turkey breast and called my sister in Phoenix. She asked how Nathan was doing. I said fine. She asked if I'd seen the grandkids recently. I said it had been a while. She heard something in my voice and said, "You doing okay, Ed?" And I said yes, because what else to say? I was not okay. I was lonelier than I'd been since the months right after my wife died, and I was angry, in that quiet way that doesn't show on the surface, the kind of anger that doesn't come out as yelling. It just settles into your chest and stays there and hardens. But I kept working. December went by. January. I spent Christmas alone too. Nathan and Kristen took the kids to her parents' place in Connecticut. I got a group text on Christmas morning that said, "Merry Christmas, Dad, we're thinking of you," with a Santa emoji. I sent back a thumbs up. In February, we heard from the grant program again. They weren't offering a grant. They were asking if we'd be willing to enter into a cooperative agreement with a federal agency to pilot the system on a broader scale, 23 bridges across 4 states. They had implementation funding. They had a timeline. They wanted to know if we could deliver. Dwight called me at 7 in the morning. I was already awake. I've been waking up at 5:30 since I turned 60. Something in your body just decides sleep is no longer worth pursuing past a certain point. "They want 23 bridges," he said. I sat down on my couch. 23! Plia's already running the numbers on sensor deployment. We'd need to bring in 2 more engineers, probably a project manager. "Okay," I said. "Ed, this is it." I knew it was. I'd known it for a while, actually. Not in a self-congratulatory way, more like the way you know a structure is sound before anyone else tests it. You've run the math. You know what it can hold. What I hadn't told Dwight, what I hadn't told anyone, was that in November, quietly, a private infrastructure investment firm out of Pittsburgh had also reached out. They'd heard about the Pennsylvania pilot through someone at the County Transportation Authority. They wanted to discuss licensing the technology for commercial applications, private toll roads, port infrastructure, rail bridges. We'd had 2 conversations that were exploratory and non-committal, but the number they'd mentioned as a potential licensing valuation was not a small number. I'd been sitting with that number for 3 months. Not because I was being secretive, because I didn't entirely believe it yet. and I've learned in my life that it's better to be quiet about things until you know they're real. My wife used to say I was the most unexcitable person she'd ever met. She didn't mean it as a criticism. She meant I was steady. I think that's what she meant. The federal agreement was signed in March. It was a public document. Cooperative agreements with federal agencies get published in the procurement database. Anyone who knew to look could find it. Most people don't know to look, but some people do know to look. My son is one of them. He works in corporate finance. He monitors public procurement announcements as part of his job. It's one of those things you don't think about, but people in his world track federal contract activity as a market signal. He called me on a Thursday afternoon in April. I was at the drafting table when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it because I was in the middle of something, but I saw his name and picked up. His voice was different from the careful, measured voice he uses when he's managing me. It was the voice I remembered from when he was 19 and had just failed his first college exam and called me, not knowing what to say. "Dad," he said, "I was looking at the federal procurement database this morning for something for work, and I saw there's a cooperative agreement with your name on it." I waited. "Callahan, Dwight, and Priya? That's you, right? That's your project?" "Yes," I said. Silence. "Then, Dad, this is a federal infrastructure pilot. 23 bridges. How long have you been working on this?" "About 2 years," I said. More silence. I could hear him breathing. "You never said anything." "You never asked," I said, and then because I didn't want it to come out wrong, "I don't mean that as an accusation, Nathan. I was working on something, and I wanted to wait until I knew it was real before I talked about it." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I started to wonder if the call had dropped. Then he said, "Dad, I'm sorry. About Thanksgiving. About all of it." I didn't say it's fine, because it wasn't fine. I didn't say I forgive you, because I wasn't ready to say that so quickly. I said, "I know." He asked if he could come see me that weekend. I said yes. He showed up Saturday morning with his 2 kids, my grandchildren, 8 and 10 years old, who I hadn't seen since the previous summer. My granddaughter walked in carrying a drawing she'd made, a bridge, colored in green and blue crayon, with little stick figures standing on it. She said, "Grandpa, Dad said you build bridges. I drew you one." I had to set that drawing down and look at the ceiling for a moment. Kristen wasn't with him. Nathan said she was sorry she couldn't come, that she had a prior commitment. I didn't push it. Some things take longer than a Saturday morning. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd had that conversation 2 years ago, and I showed Nathan some of the framework documentation. He's not an engineer, but he understood enough. He kept shaking his head slowly, the way people do when they realize they've been looking at something wrong. "Why didn't you ever tell us what you were doing?" he asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly, because for a long time, I think I believed you when you acted like I didn't have anything worth saying anymore. I finally told him. It takes a while to stop believing that. He looked like I'd said something that hurt him. Good. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because some things need to register before they can change. The licensing conversation with the Pittsburgh firm concluded in May. I'm not going to give you a number, because numbers like that don't feel real when you say them out loud, and I'm a private person. What I will say is that it was enough to change the material conditions of my life significantly, and more importantly, it was validation of something I'd believed for 2 years when nobody around me was paying attention. The federal pilot launched in June. There was a small ceremony at a bridge outside Pittsburgh, the first one to have the full sensor suite installed. A state transportation official gave a short speech. Dwight and Priya and I stood in the back, squinting in the morning sun. A photographer from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette took a picture of the 3 of us in front of the installation equipment. It ran in the paper 2 days later. My sister in Phoenix saw it first. She called me screaming, which was gratifying. Nathan saw it too. He texted me a screenshot of the article with a single line, "That's my dad." I stared at that text for a long time. Not because it was everything I'd wanted, It wasn't. A text message is not an apology, and it's not a bridge rebuilt between two people. It's a start. It's a man in his 40s realizing he'd been wrong about his father for years and not quite knowing how to say it, so he sent a screenshot and 3 words instead. That's something. I'll take something. Kristen called me herself in July. I'll give her credit for that. It would have been easier for her to say nothing, or to let Nathan carry it, or to send me a text with a heart emoji and call it square. Instead, she called and she spoke carefully, and she said she thought she'd been unkind to me and that she was sorry. She didn't make a lot of excuses. She said she'd been stressed about having family in the house for the holidays, and she'd taken the path of least resistance, and she knew that wasn't right. I said, I appreciate you saying that. She said, we'd like you to come for Thanksgiving this year, if you want to. I said I'd think about it. And I will. I'm genuinely not sure yet. Forgiveness is real and I'm working toward it. But sitting at that table again, in the house where I've been made to feel invisible, is going to require more than a phone call. It's going to require some change behavior over time, and I'm 63 years old and I've learned the hard way not to confuse apologies with change. What I know for certain is this. I spent the loneliest 2 years of my life after my wife died, doing the most meaningful work of my career, and almost no one around me knew it was happening. I almost let what my family thought of me determine what I thought of myself. I almost believed that being retired and 60-something meant I was past the point of mattering. I wasn't. I'm not. And if you're somewhere in your 50s or 60s or beyond, and someone in your life has made you feel like your best days are archived history, I want you to hear this clearly. The people who've lived the longest have the most compounded knowledge. Compound knowledge is the most powerful force I've ever encountered, and I spend my career working with actual physical forces. Don't let anyone's impatience with you become your own. My granddaughter's crayon bridge is hanging on my wall right now, above the drafting table. I look at it when I'm working. There are little stick figures standing on it, and one of them has gray hair, and she told me that one is me. I don't know if I'll ever build another bridge, but I know I'm not done standing on them. There's a crayon drawing of a bridge on my wall right now, green and blue, stick figures standing on it. My granddaughter told me the one with gray hair is me. I look at it sometimes when I'm sitting at the drafting table and I think about how close I came to believing what my family's silence was telling me, that I was finished, that the most useful years were behind me, and what remained was just time to be managed. I almost accepted that, not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, the way water gets into concrete and you don't notice until the damage is already done. What I understand now is that what happened to me wasn't random. It followed a logic, even when it was painful. Kristen didn't exclude me from Thanksgiving because she was a cruel person. She excluded me because I had made it easy. I had stepped back so completely, so quietly that I had essentially told everyone around me there was nothing left to step toward. That's on me as much as it's on her. When you stop showing up, not just physically, but in the way you carry yourself, in the way you talk about what you're doing and what you still believe is possible, other people take that as information. They start treating you accordingly. The work I did in that second bedroom changed that. Not because it made me rich or because it put my name in a federal database where my son could find it. It changed things because it required me to keep showing up every single day for something I believed in, even when no one was watching and no one was asking. That kind of commitment, the quiet, unglamorous, daily kind, is not something you can fake, and it's not something that stays invisible forever. It has a way of surfacing eventually. The truth usually does. What I want to say to anyone who's in the middle of what I was in the middle of is this. The knowledge you've built over decades doesn't expire. It compounds. Every year of experience you have is interest on top of interest, and people who haven't lived as long as you simply do not have access to it yet, no matter how confident they seem. That compounding is real. Don't let someone else's impatience with you convince you it isn't. But here's what I had to learn the hard way. Accumulated knowledge means nothing if you don't have the integrity to use it honestly, to do the work right even when there's no audience, even when the result is uncertain, even when the people closest to you have already written you off. Nathan didn't find my name in that database because I was trying to prove something to him. He found it because I was doing the work regardless of whether anyone would ever notice. That's the only version of this that I could have lived with, showing up for the right reasons, not the audience. And then there's the matter of not quitting. That one sounds simple, and it is not simple at all. 14 months alone in that room, running calculations, jumping on video calls with Dwight and Priya, writing grant applications into the night. None of that felt heroic while I was doing it. It felt like stubbornness. Maybe it was, but I've come to think that stubbornness and perseverance are the same thing, depending on whether it worked out. My son sent me a text the day the newspaper article ran. 3 words, "That's my dad." I've read it more times than I'd like to admit, not because I needed his approval. I stopped needing it somewhere around month 4 of that pilot program, but because those 3 words told me something had shifted in how he saw me, and more importantly, in how he saw what age and experience can still do. I'm not done building. That's the only thing I know for certain right now. I'm not done.